I think we'll get started. Welcome everyone to Geriatrics Grand Rounds. I am pleased to get to introduce basically our speaker today, whom I have known for 2 years and 3 weeks, I think, because we met just pre-pandemic. Um, it's hard to know where to begin with Ann Basting, but I think I'll give you sort of the official go at it and then explain what it means. So Ann Basting is an artist, writer, educator, and a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where she directs the Center for 21st Century Studies. And she's also the founder and creative strategist of the award-winning TimeSlips Creative Storytelling, an international alliance of artists and caregivers bringing meaning to late life through creativity. Now, except for that last bit, you might wonder why she's at a medical center giving geriatrics grand rounds. And the reason is actually pretty simple. It's because her creative and scholarly work does something that this audience knows all too well is missing from older lives, from communities where older people live, and from most clinical settings. Her work infuses meaning making into health and social care settings, the places we all work, basically. And she's always had a particular focus on people with dementia. Actually, she takes that work a step farther because she sees it as a human right, that we all have meaning and purpose. And we've all seen the data on how older people without meaning and purpose are less healthy and die sooner. So she's actually addressing that, which is something the rest of us tend to just note. So seeing meaning and purpose as a human right is an interesting addition to what we offer our patients right now. Now, Ann Basting is also kind of a superstar. I found this out when I arrived at TEDMed and everybody was whispering about the one who had been chosen to deliver the first talk. That was Ann. And also the only one who had won a MacArthur Genius Grant. I was actually thinking, I'm not sure we've had a MacArthur winner here before, so you might be our first. She has a whole host of other awards, including an Ashoka Fellowship, a Brookdale Fellowship, Rockefeller Fellowship, and she's written multiple books, I think at least four. Her latest is Creative Care, and you can see how that would pertain to our work. And another one that seems particularly apt is Forget Memory. Now, she's trained as a theater artist, so she works on a variety of theater projects, and this one's for Eric and Alex and anyone else of this bent, but she's currently working on a project that invites wonderment in everyday moments on her Instagram page, so check her out there. We are very pleased to have Ann with us today and looking forward to learning new ways of making the world better and hopefully our patients' lives better. So welcome and thanks for coming.
That was quite a welcome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I'm actually really, all the conversations today really humbled and thankful to have been invited to speak with you today and to really learn with you all today throughout all the meetings and now too in the Q&A. So make sure to scribble down questions as we go. Um, uh, as Dr. Aronson said, my work across my career has really been focused on mining the powers of imagination and creativity to draw out human stories, to draw out the creative spirit in every human being all the way to the end of life. We do a great job of drawing out the human spirit up to about, I don't know, age 12. Then we kind of forget and it becomes extra. As a child, I found the worlds of imagination and creativity a real respite to loneliness that can set in, particularly in middle and intermediate school, and as a way to play and connect with others. And in some ways, my work has really been an effort to never have to stop that creative play and wonderment. I get to do it for a living, which is an incredible joy and luxury. I have that privilege of inviting people who have lost access to meaning making for myriad reasons to rediscover it. And that isn't always the people with dementia, sometimes it's the doctors and the nurses. Today, I aim to explore how this work of meaning making has been under imagined for its potential transformative impact and reach, how it has the potential to ease loneliness and improve health and quality of life at a societal level, and might more fully lead us toward relational understanding of and practices of care. So here I get to share my screen and slideshow. There we go. So the first hospital, the late 1700s, Philadelphia. The first art museum, early 1800s. The patent office, actually, which was taken over by the Smithsonian in DC. In this era, culture and meaning making were starting to be separated from health. And over the last several decades, we've slowly been reintegrating them. Now there are hospitals, there are galleries in hospitals, there are musical performances in hospital and clinic settings. There is the National Organization for Arts in Health, renamed just a couple of years ago. The World Health Organization in 2019 began supporting research to test, quote, arts interventions to advance specific health goals, including universal health coverage, mental health, suicide prevention, maternal health, blindness prevention, and quality of care. A recent story in the New Yorker tells us that patient advocates agree, which is already a wow. They agree that art belongs in hospitals. But what kind? Academic training programs now exist for credentialing people in arts and medicine. Narrative medicine programs exist, as you all probably well know. Managing arts and health programs are also proliferating across the country. UCSF's own Julian Johnson has been testing the impact of participation in community choirs on physical and cognitive health. And of course, Teresa Allison's research on music as well. There's a new program called the Neuro Arts Blueprint, launched in 2019, designed to put all of that in place. A partnership between Johns Hopkins International Arts and Mind Lab Center and Applied Neuroaesthetics in the Aspen Institute's Health Medicine and Society program. That initiative engages leaders across a wide range of disciplines, as well as people with lived experience. And together, they are helping drive the paradigm shift necessary to fully integrate the arts and aesthetic experiences into activities that will advance individual and collective health across the planet. That is quite a sea change right there. But we still call them non-pharmaceutical interventions. We are still fundamentally separating the arts from health. This is Del Seaton Teaching Hospital at UT Austin and the Blanton Art Museum's new design at UT Austin. We are building cathedrals for these two separate spheres. We look at these arts from myriad perspectives. We see them as for sort of their instrumental effect, as soothing and calming and stress reduction. We see them, oh, hang on. There we go. As enriching an environment. We see them for a particular intervention for a health goal. We see them loosely as general entertainment and distraction, which can also be soothing and calming. We see them as building a sense of belonging or community. We see them for the possibility, at least this is where I see them, as building the possibility of purpose, having purpose and meaning in one's life. All of this on one entity that we all see so differently, the elephant in the room, which is meaning making through arts and culture. But what if we shifted And as Dr. Aronson said in the introduction, we saw meaning making instead as the umbrella category as a human right. What if social support in social determinants of health was understood more broadly to include a sense of purpose and meaning in one's life? And what if we studied our systems of engagement and opened their capacity to include meaningful engagement and meaning making in them? What would that do to how we see the elephant? And would it enable us, instead of seeing it like a single blood cell, what if we saw it more like a bloodstream? What if that elephant was in motion? What if it was part of every moment of our lives? How would we see it differently? My work for 30 years now has been to see it in that way, as much more as infused in every moment of our lives, more like pouring it into the water of care, of reminding people that creativity is an innate human capacity, of teaching creative engagement as communication and relationship building tool that nourishes both sides of the care partnership, of mapping care systems and infusing creative engagement, feedback loops, uh, infusing feedback loops into care systems so that health or social service systems themselves become creative culture making systems. Now, I'll give more examples of that later because that's a lot to bite off. Perhaps in the pandemic, as we have all experienced the isolation that so many elders and caregivers experience, the potential of the unique tools of the arts and culture to ease stress, build self-efficacy and purpose, forge meaningful social connections, and reframe narratives about aging and disability as decline and despair, maybe that is more clear than ever before. And today, I really share with you some stories that I hope reveal all of that potential and that support my long-term goal, which is the reintegration of meaning making and the arts into health and social service systems at every touch point of care, particularly in situations where communication is jeopardized and isolation is pronounced, like in dementia, when a lack of understanding between people can so easily lead to objectifying and to giving up, to getting overwhelmed with and frustrated by care. So meet Edna. Edna lives in a nursing home deep in rural Kentucky, where, as the nursing home administrator told me, it is common for people to be dropped off with one big black plastic garbage bag and no one ever comes back. When I met Edna, she rode a wheelchair and couldn't speak. And yet she yearned to connect. You could feel her yearning to connect. She and so many others at the 12 nursing homes where I worked in rural Kentucky. We'll see Edna a little later, along with Mary and Viola, all of whom wrestled with dementia. Imagine that isolation of dementia, words coming at you that you can't process fast enough, concepts that form and dissolve before you can grasp them. Someone is asking you something, but you cannot understand it. They don't wait long enough for you to grasp it, for the ideas to turn into words, and for the words to form and come out. And sometimes the words don't form at all. All you can do is offer a sound. And sometimes you sit still to let the moment pass so it doesn't make you dizzy. Friends fall away because they don't know how to reach you, and isolation breeds resentment. The Casiopo research on loneliness shows that the stress response actually makes people more suspicious, even combative, and less desirable to be around. And so isolation compounds itself. Most people simply do not understand dementia. Cultural attitudes shroud it in shame at worst and inconvenience at best. And in the pandemic, we saw it barely even register as being valued life. As an emotional and symbolic language that does not rely on relational chronological ordering of words, creative engagement offers a way to break the grip of loneliness and isolation. It's a language that every human being has access to, the language of play and imagination. If we learn to, we can in turn invite its expression from another person in a process that builds on and affirms remaining strengths and shapes it into something of value, something we can take pride in, something that carries meaning and fuels a sense of purpose. So, what do I mean? So, here's the simplest possible version of this. In a moment, you say you're passing by a window and you're walking with someone in a wheelchair, you're rolling someone, and you stop and you pause and you look. I'm looking out the window right now, and you say, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you imagine you see and hear? And you use improvisation to drive the process forward, accepting what a person says and asking another question, building on it in a positive way. And you offer proof of listening by either writing it down or echoing whatever comes out so the person gains the belief that they are being heard and is demonstrated at being heard. And you can use this as a simple communication tool in interpersonal communication or as an activity that builds and transforms an entire, say, 12 rural nursing homes in Kentucky into cultural centers and a way to produce culture and meaning making. So another example of a beautiful question is this very simple question that we've used. I used this just now. If you could look outside your window and see anything you wish, what would you want to see and why? We use this question actually as part of multiple projects. You can see this was actually the design for a card that went out with Meals on Wheels drivers that were used and encouraged through well-check phone calls. And there were 800 numbers where people could respond and leave their voicemail with their answer, either through a proxy caregiver or the person themselves. They could also write their response on the back, and the feedback loop was to collect it as well. So this very simple interpersonal approach of shifting a moment that can be a moment of conflict around a wrong answer into an opening of shared discovery and imagination with no right or wrong answer. TimeSlips is the nonprofit that I work with. And over the pandemic, actually, they created something called engagement parties, which were just an opportunity to share that very simple communication technique with family and friends who really suddenly were isolated and were the only support system at home for meaningful activities. We created guides for families to walk each other through the process. And they were meant as little informal gatherings and joyful. What other moments do you have for a joyful gathering with people with dementia? This is part of that very simple shift and the educational training that we do, inviting a person into the moment with you, asking a beautiful question, echoing what you hear and offering proof of listening, and asking another question from their response. That is the core of that exchange. How can we use those in everyday situations? A very simple one that we give in the engagement party materials. Say someone can't come up with the right word and is getting frustrated, rather than correct them and underscore either the shame or the correction, say, what do you want to call it? The red bottle. Okay, here's the red bottle. And earlier today, I gave this example. Someone says their foot hurts but can't describe what about it. Instead saying, if your foot could talk, what would it say? I'm tired. Okay, what can we do to wake up your foot? And actually, this exact question, if your foot could talk, what would it say, became a poem, a really beautiful poem that was written in a nursing home in Texas with a group of women. And I have that story in Creative Care if you wanna read about that. The other component of this is that you can build it, like I said, out of an interpersonal relationship or a moment of creative meaning into more of an activity that can compound and be used to build relationships, social relationships, and community. So that out of that little exchange, that creative moment, comes a product that demonstrates your commitment to the person, to the meaning making process, and the value both of what they're giving you and the person themselves. So an example of that are these cards that we distributed. These went out actually with an art. Sheboygan, Wisconsin has the John Michael Kohler Art Center. And during the pandemic, they had a little art truck that went around the whole community and offered little kits for people to use in their homes. And these were included in there. What is the most beautiful sound in the world? And I love this example because it's your mother's voice from birth to the end of time. And also just the handwriting and how you can feel the person's presence in the handwriting as well. They displayed these at the art center itself, so people could come back. And again, that's an example of the feedback loop that you can create. How do you distribute the invitation to meaning making? How do you gather it back? And how do you build on it? And how do you then share that product back with the people who gave it to you? That feedback loop I'll be describing throughout today. Here it is right here, a little bit. I actually drew this out because I was trying to figure out how I could explain the feedback loop. So when we partnered with Meals on Wheels, the elder was at the center, and we looked at all, I use my hand to kind of show this sometimes. We looked at all the systems in place to meet that are reaching that person. So it was the telephone well checks, the meal drivers, the companion visits or home care workers. We actually identified a couple others, but those were the ones we ended up really partnering with. And then we came in and studied those systems, and then we slipped the meaning making process right on top of it. So we weren't asking them to do something different other than what they were doing, just lifting and creating a little space for meaning making to go in through that same system. So you're just boosting the capacity for wonderment between between the hand sandwich right there. And then building on and gathering it and sharing it back through the same mechanisms that are already in place. We did this during the pandemic. One of the things that happened in the pandemic was that artists were also all out of work. So we trained artists to use the beautiful question approach with older adults who were suddenly isolated. All of the senior centers, of course, shut down. And so there were some social service agencies that popped up to take on reaching out to people who normally attended the senior centers. And they paired each artist with 10 older adults. And they used the beautiful questions as a prompt for story exchange and story shaping sessions that were about a half an hour once a week. And at the end of the 12 weeks for that program, they built it into something that could be shared, a kind of a beautiful legacy gift that they had shaped together. So an example of that is actually the first artist here, Brenna, asked one of her beautiful questions was, what is the recipe for a good life? And she invited recipes of favorite foods, and she actually made them alone in her apartment, and took pictures of them and shared them back with the people she was talking to. But then also they shared stories about what are recipes for a good life. And she turned them all into a big recipe book, both the real recipes with the photographs and then the recipes for a good life as well. One of the things we found through that process was we did use the UCLA loneliness scale, just the 3 items. And we reduced loneliness, I think it was right around 50% for the older adults that were engaged, over 100 of them, and about 62%, I believe, for the artists, since they were also isolated. I think they had a higher impact of reduction of loneliness because they got to talk to 10 people, and the older adults only got to talk to one artist. So they had an extra compounding effect. At the end of this, we also had the 800 numbers with people calling in their responses to the beautiful questions that went out also through the meal delivery system. We partnered with United Community Center, which is a Latino and Latina community center serving Spanish-speaking older adults in Milwaukee. And we had the artists create something, so that feedback loop of how we get the questions out, how we gather them back in through the cards and through the phone calls and the voicemail messages, how we shape it into something, and then how we share it back. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video here from what the artist created. And you can, I think we shared this out on public television so that people could actually hear it and see it. And then also did radio stories about the whole project so they could hear it on the radio, and they knew they were part of something important and meaningful.
Hello, my name is Phyllis.
My name is Alice Cartwright.
Yes, my name is Deborah Kraft.
Hi, the name is Donna Jane Hamdia.
My name is Philip Blank.
My name is Janet.
This is Ernest.
What do you treasure in your home and why?
Mainly memories. Also, I do paintings, art paintings.
Well, I'm elderly, and all my life I was a choreographer and dancer. So everything that I treasure in my home has to do with sculpture pieces and paintings of dancers and dance notes and anything to do with the dance career, costumes, that type of thing.
The area of my home that's special is my garden.
The living room, because I like to read there.
The area is my family room, where the family can gather to share ideas and thoughts.
My kitchen is special. This is where everybody always congregated.
The area that's special to me is my bed. What I like to do there is sleep, because sometimes I really have some fantastic dreams.
If you could look outside your window and see anything you wish, what would you want to see?
If I looked out my window, I would like to see a very large garden of roses, of all different kinds of roses and different colors.
I would like to see small kids around here again.
I would like to see some birds.
I like to see the birds.
Oh, I really love birds outside the window because my mother was a bird lover, and on her card, on the funeral card, she said, think of me when you see birds, and I do all the time.
What makes Milwaukee special? It's my home, the water, Lake Michigan.
What would you like to tell Milwaukee?
Pues solo gracias, a mí me ha tratado muy bien y espero que a muchísima gente le pase lo mismo. Para mí no le hace falta nada.
It's great. I love being here. I love the family feeling of Milwaukee.
I would tell Milwaukee County that I would not want to live anywhere else.
On my porch or on the road, I'm feeling like I'm always
share a little bit more about that project a little bit later. I'm going to skip this one. It's the story of a beautiful question. If you had a superpower, what would it be? That opened up with a group of older adults with disabilities who each created a persona of a superhero for themselves, and then decided that they didn't want to fight their nemesis alone. So they actually created the Righteous League and created a whole series of stories where each one of them was working together to overcome their challenges. And then we published it into a book and worked with an artist to create superhero panels for each of the characters that they had created. So that's a super fast description of that project. I really wanted to get to this one because to me, this is a great reminder, and we should hold it as a lesson for what we should insist on now that we have an opportunity, I hope, to press a reset button in congregate residential care for older adults. This was the project that I worked on from 2018 to the end of 2019, and it came to fruition just, it's hard to believe, before lockdown. We didn't actually get to finish the evaluation because of lockdown, but together over 2 years, I worked with a team of artists and staff and residents and local volunteers from 12 nursing homes across rural, they were all in rural Kentucky, all solidly Medicaid. And we taught them the approach of inviting creative and meaningful expression. And we used as a prompt the story of reimagining the story of Peter Pan, and broke it into multiple themes, and then invited the staff and sort of gave the staff agency to really explore all kinds of different beautiful questions based on it. The arts team went around and visited and did training and reinforcement of the approach. And eventually we built it into an interactive, immersive theater production that included whatever anyone in those nursing homes wanted to do, and inviting in the outside world. So it became the story of Wendy's Neverland, which you can see the sign, and the residents painted it and helped to hang it. The staff helped to hang it and design it. It was the story of Wendy, who is on hospice and living in the nursing home, now on hospice and nearing the end of her growing up. And she told magnificent stories of Neverland as for the 10 years she's been living in this nursing home. But now she's near the end and everyone just loves her. They don't believe her. They think she's read the book too many times or seen the movie. But they want to honor her by restaging these stories. So all the residents and staff dress up as lost boys or pirates or fairies or a mixture of all of the three, and invite the outside world in to write their positive thoughts on clouds that they all made, to write their fears on a canning lid and affix it to the cloak of the crocodile, to learn how to fly and to say where they would like to fly to sing songs that the local musicians were creating, volunteers and artists. You can see the residents down below. Jimmy is the king of the pirates, was the character he created. Bethany was the director of nursing, who's in the white hat, and she actually wrote a song for the opening. And the head of Life Enrichment is in the bright pink tutu there. One of the assignments that we gave them was to enchant a place in the nursing home that was hidden, that people could discover. And this was one of the drawers that they created. And another was to enchant a place that's seen. So again, we learn the systems of the place And we invited them to expand everyday life in the nursing home and create a space for meaning and wonder. So they called this the pixie dust station rather than, the hand sanitizer station. And you can see some of the clouds that they created of things that give them positive thoughts, with the kitten cloud next to that. We also asked them to write a letter to Peter about things they miss in their childhood, but also what they wouldn't have been able to do had they not grown up. So we had a whole series of letters from people, and then audio recorded them reading them in their own voices. I do miss playing in the creek and in the rocks, but if I wouldn't have grown up, I wouldn't have been able to get a job. And I still miss being able to, I can't read all of it because it's actually, let me see, being and travel around the world, but I still miss you and being able to spread my arms and fly over Neverland. The being invited into something this profound and meaningful, our goal really was to transform these really stigmatized places where people go to die, essentially, or be warehoused, into places where meaning and beauty could be made every day. And you could feel the power of the promise of that participation in meaning making draw people out of their rooms. Several of the stories of people who hadn't been out of their rooms for months and who came out to participate every day in the rehearsals and in the performances themselves. And one of the fears that one of the participants wrote on the canning lid was, what happens when this performance is over? Mary participated and came out every day, and kept asking, is it going to go on? One of the things we made sure is that we asked the staff and the residents what story they wanted to tell next, so that there was a continued momentum after the performances were over, to make sure that they knew what the next project was, and that they could ask all of the people who came to see and participate in the performances to help them reimagine the next story. In this particular community, the story was Tom Sawyer. In another one, it was Wizard of Oz. And in another one, it was the story of Abraham Lincoln, whose birthplace was the town Hodgenville, Kentucky, where the nursing home was. We had a crocodile, very playful. As you can see, people loved this crocodile. You can see the canning lids affixed to him as well. The final piece, we go all through the nursing home and come up and end in the dining room. This is a hard picture to look at now, knowing what's happening and has happened over the pandemic, of everyone masked and no group gathering, even people eating their meals in isolation. And to have come from this, where we had 300 people, audience members and older adults, staff members, family, children of staff members, great-grandchildren of residents coming in to play and perform in this together. The final piece was choreographed by the older adults, singing I'll Fly Away, the gospel folk song, by local musicians being played, and the singing of it. And then the invitation for Wendy to fly away. And we wished her well on her way. The crocodile was her friend as they flew away together. I'm just going to play a short piece of this because I'm sure my explanation of this project sounds a little crazy, but this really shares with you what happened.
What is TimeSlips Creative Community of Care Training? It's learning to use the arts to invite all elders into meaningful expression and relationship. It's holding creative workshops that build into a creative celebration event.
So when I first heard about it, I had no idea what it was going to be, and I think that was kind of everybody's gist of it.
We were a little puzzled. I know personally I was a little skeptical, so I was kind of like, okay, I can kind of see what they're getting at, but we'll just have to wait and see.
It all starts with learning the TimeSlips creative engagement technique, which is really a way of communicating, not just in activities, but every moment of the day.
Out of what we've just learned, who can tell us all the short version of the story of Peter Pan?
Look like they're flying.
I'd enjoy flying if I could fly.
They're dreaming. They're dreaming. Thank you.
We learn to play together and to make meaning and shape that meaning into a culminating public celebration. That can be a simple art exhibit or even a full play production.
Now a small circle to the left.
They were going down our hallway singing, and you would catch yourself singing, and if the play wasn't even going on, you were singing. And so there was just a sense of joy that we normally don't have every day that the play created, and it was just wonderful.
It was an emotional experience for us. It was something else, I'll just tell you.
It was awesome having it here because we got to be a part of it every single day. Everybody did. Staff, elders, families, community.
It's like taboo. People don't want to go in nursing homes and they think, well, what can I do? There's a lot they can do.
Take the jump and do it. Like the thought of doing it again is like, oh, that's a lot of work, but it's totally worth it in the end.
I didn't think we could ever do that. I just didn't think we could. I guess I didn't have enough faith. But I believe now.
They believe, Wendy. They believe. We can fly. Don't be afraid. They're going to help us fly. Will you all help us fly? Yes!
When we started this, we genuinely did not know if it was possible to transform a nursing home into a cultural center where beauty can be made every day and artists are everywhere. This is now a cultural center. Congratulations.
Every human being is creator. We can all turn and invite. What is
I also, I'm not going to share this because we don't have time, but the artists also made beautiful animations based on the phone interviews and shared them back with the older adults through the telephone call system that we created as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I've been doing as far as like immersing is also engaging. I've been teaching a class at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for about 7 or 8 years now, called Student Artist in Residence Program, where students live in long-term care settings and learn these community building and expressive community building techniques as part in response to living in exchange for living in and getting room and board. So they're all coming from wildly different expertise and experiences, but they really become part of the fabric of the community as well. So I think that's a really important component, that we start to break down the age segregation and the ability, the ableism and the ageism that's embedded in our segregation in this country. Again, I just move us toward a day that we really see differently, that arts can be poured into our care systems, to settings where we see the arts as activities or interventions, that it really needs to be infused into moments of care, so that there is no distinction between culture and meaning making settings or systems and health and social service systems, that we can use that goal of the merger to help us see our own systems a little bit differently, and to read where we can do that infusion process ourselves. I'll stop here for questions and really ask of you all how you see the possibility for these meaning making techniques to be poured into your own systems. And then from your own kind of reward or evaluation or research, what would you see as being the thing that would tip it over the edge of being seen as, to make it be seen as valued or worth the infusion process? So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was amazing and inspiring. Let me ask a couple of the questions. How many nursing homes is TimeSlip involved with, or sort of the scale of this? And it gets a little bit at sort of the support. I mean, this takes a lot of effort, and how is this supported in terms of dissemination?
Sure, and I'll back up and say, you know, I start the talk by talking just about the communication loop.
Mm-hmm.
That's the micro, everyday, like sort of everyday moments of meaning making, and then you can move into sort of an activity that's engaging and inviting expression out, and then you can kind of connect those activities over time. The play project, I think, is like this whole thing on steroids. It's like the biggest possible imagining. Mm-hmm. So that is just a rare thing that we do to kind of really get people to see what's possible at its biggest possible scale. So those are very special projects. One of those is happening right now in Durham, North Carolina. We're collaborating with some home care and social service systems, and then giving the beautiful question responses to the Durham Children's Choir, who created an original composition and is integrating that into their spring concert. We've been training on an individual basis for since 2011. We've been tracking the online training. We have over 1,000 certified facilitators, all in 49 states and 23 countries now. And then shifted toward organizational training, and have around 100 organizations. So that would be like a library in Pennsylvania, a nursing home, an assisted living. So it's really all over the place. And they really just use the approach to infuse it into their activity programming, and to look differently at their creative capacity. So their physical structures of how they could be used more creatively, their human resources of their own staffing and their residents and their family and their volunteers, and also their kind of technology infrastructures about how they could be used and transformed in that way. We've just started shifting into systems. So really trying to look at an entire home care company and infusing the approach into their training for 15,000 caregivers, home care workers, and trying to get, you know, our mission is really that sea change or that systems change to mm-hmm. get creative engagement into the water of care. So wherever we can tap into those systems is kind of where we're moving now.
Fantastic. I have a question here from lots of accolades in the Q&A saying wonderful talk, breath of fresh air. I have a question from Julian Johnson. He says, hey, you know, wonderful talk, very inspiring. I wonder if you could elaborate a bit more about how the arts contribute to meaning making. What is unique about the arts? Like, why not some other type of process?
Well, you know, the arts, and this is where, you know, and Julian and I have talked a little bit about this as well, that the arts is understood sort of from the outside. There is the discipline of music, there is dance, there is poetry, and these are all sort of matched in the therapeutic expressive systems where you get a specific degree in these different approaches, or there's a department of dance. So therefore we're going to, dance is a discrete intervention, right? But if you're immersed in the arts, especially, I come from theater where every single art form is inside of it. And it's really, to me, about expressive meaning making and creativity. The thing that's really valuable about it as a communication tool is that it is generative. You can make it out of nothing, which is what a lot of people have. Absolutely nothing. You can simply decide to imagine a world together, and that is a powerful thing. It's also an emotional and symbolic language that is enhanced through the senses, which are all things that are remaining strengths for older adults, particularly with cognitive challenges. And so regardless of kind of your ability or disability, you have the capacity to shape some sort of creative expression and create something of value. And that is kind of a key to starting to participate. If you can't participate in the productivity or the economic world to find value, you can use the arts generativity process to create value for yourself and others, and the relationship that you have.
I love that. Sort of the reinventing of purpose as you go through. I think that's, I have a question here from Alex Smith, who also says, terrific work. Any thoughts about how poetry in particular is distinct from other arts in the ways in which it might help older adults or those caring for them?
I see poetry, again, you'll notice that I see the arts as very loose category. And so to me, poetry is language with air blown into it. And so you're creating space for meaning overlapping and new meaning generated from what we see as existing words, or also imagery out of language. And poetry, poetic phrasing, or the use of words as an expressive tool in that way is already where people with dementia are. It's already where they are. They're using, if they can't find one word, they're using another one to stand in for it. So they're already in metaphor, they're already in image and symbol. So it becomes a place to almost invite the care world into a shared emotional experience with a person with dementia, because that's already where they are. I know Gary Glasner well, who does the Alzheimer's Poetry Project, and we both use a similar technique of call and response. Poetry for a certain generation of people and a certain economic, group of people studied and memorized poetry. And so the cadence of the language and the way it's memorized is deep in sort of the encoding in our brains, and can be used to kind of draw people out in a similar way as music. A lot of the performances that we use in the performance techniques are about call and response, which are always inviting a person into the moment of creativity. They can participate even if they can't memorize. They can participate through call and response.
Fantastic. I love the beautiful questions and the cards. And is there a place that you could go, or any of us as in physicians, or to look for ideas, or, what are some of the beautiful questions? I loved all the examples, but I didn't know if there's cards or things that could help in terms of how to infuse it during a clinic visit, or, or doing some other type of activity with our families.
Yeah, it's another thing we did actually sort of just before the pandemic. We had funding from the Ralph Wilson Foundation, which supports caregiving, to do a human-centered design process with families with dementia, to kind of translate this and create, it's called the Creative Care Imagination Kit. And it's about 15 beautiful questions, 15 images to use as prompts, and then a little journal that people can use to write responses, and simple directions and instructions and kind of guides are in that journal as well. To me, good design is also honoring and value. You can see that in a lot of the work that we do, really spending your time on a beautiful design, so that we really put a lot of energy in designing the kit itself. And that's just, you can just find it online. It's from Harper. Harper did creative care, and then they put out the kit to go with it.
Fantastic. And I think I just have one more question about just sort of thinking about post-COVID. Sort of how have you adapted some of these things now? Because we were looking at the picture going, oh my goodness, that's probably a little bit further down the road. But sort of other things, I guess, how has COVID affected, your approach?
Yeah, I think it's just changed I do all the studying of distribution systems. And to me, we'd been doing telestories, the phone-based, we started that in 2011. And did a huge project, and we've partnered with Meals on Wheels nationally now on a 5-city pilot to train the drivers, train the well check callers, the volunteers to use beautiful questions, and again create that feedback loop for meaning making and the development of social capital. So that's happening. To me, the phone, Zoom is awesome. Not everyone has it. Not everyone can even update the software once they get it. So to me, the phone is really an underrated, least common denominator technology that also sort of helps you bypass ageism, because we really have a visual issue with the aging body, and the voice itself doesn't have the same baggage. And so you can create bonds and empathy through voice that you might not be able to otherwise. One of my fantasies is getting into a telehealth system, or connecting and putting these techniques through the telehealth system, social prescribing to support that, because and doing a really great study to really assess the impact on loneliness and isolation.
That's fantastic. And there is one more question that just snuck in here from Kenny Lamb, who really, again, thanks you for sharing your work, and curious to know about transitions, the process of transitioning between these different expanded moments where you're inserting creativity, and then these moments when the magic disappears and we end up back in reality. When will this play end? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, that's why I talk about when I design trainings and these projects, and we did the Kentucky one through the Civil Monetary Penalty Funds for skilled nursing, and we through CMS, and we really designed the on-ramp, which is the partnership building and the training, and then the creative workshop period where you're generating all of this, and then the culminating events, and then the off-ramp, which is making sure that the staff and the residents are empowered with a direction for the next project. And as it should be, like, we should be retreating as trainers and collaborators so that they feel empowered to do it. We also build the network of, you're basically radically changing how the local partners and volunteers see their work in this long-term care, in these either social service systems or care systems, so that they see their job as more active and engaged, that the family members, instead of coming out of guilt, come out of interest, right? Or the local high school, you could see the high school brass band in that final number. They don't come and play and leave and run out of there as fast as they can. They come and they're like, what should we make? What should we play together? What should we choreograph together? So they become activated. And in the process of that, you're opening the doors. And to me, bad care happens behind closed doors, and you're creating much more flow between the places of care, and it increases the expectation of what's possible, both from the residents, the staff, and the outside community.
Fantastic. Well, that's a perfect place to end. That was just so tremendous, inspiring, visionary. Truly appreciate you spending your time with us today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.